it's Yami, your Latina next door, and I am back with another video. As you know, I recently designed my craft room, and I'll make sure to link that video below. That way you guys can see the entire reveal. But for this video, I wanted to go over this stenciled wall. I have this faux cement tile wall that I created as a focal point for my craft room. Now, this isn't the first time that I've actually stenciled. I've stenciled another wall before, and I have actually stenciled my laundry room floor. Yes, my floor. And it's holding up pretty amazing, by the way. However, I wanted to give you guys a very thorough tutorial on how to stencil. Since I've done it several times already, I have kind of picked up some tips and tricks that I think would help you if you have been debating doing this in the future. Stenciling can be very tedious. It can be a lot of work, but in the end you actually save money, especially if you're going for a cement tile look like this, which is very in style with the farmhouse look. As you know, cement tile can get very expensive, so this is just an inexpensive way to get that same look. Now, you can always do wallpaper, but let's be real, if you want to change up your style in the future, that's just going to create a huge hassle to have to change it up, because you're going to have to remove that wallpaper. I've done it myself, and it can be very time consuming, but I will make sure to link to that post below. That way you can see exactly all the steps I took to remove wallpaper. Now, stenciling can be a very tedious, time-consuming job, but once finished, you actually will love the way it looks afterwards. Now, you can run into a lot of issues, and that's why I decided to make this video, because a lot of stencil tutorials don't go into what can happen scenarios. And so I'm going to walk you through the entire process of me actually creating this wall. I thought I would document everything for you guys, from going to corners like this you see right here, to going around windows and all that stuff, and to what can happen, what you do when there's bleed over, because you're gonna have bleed over. There's just nothing you can do, but there are things that you can do to try and minimize all the mishaps that you can have while creating a wall like this. Okay, so I'm going to talk about exactly all the supplies that I use, and then how I use them, and then I'm going to show you guys exactly how I start my wall. Okay, so this is basically all my supplies that I use when I stencil a wall. And it looks like a lot, but everything, I swear, has its purpose, and it'll make your life a lot easier. Now, the first thing I want to do is protect my floors. Anything directly underneath where I'm stenciling. And I use this product for whenever I paint any room. And I like it because basically it's the Pulu painter's tape and plastic. So you don't have to worry about having a drop cloth or anything in additional to the actual painter's tape, because it's already there. And basically what you do is you basically pull it out, attach it to your baseboard, and pull out the extra plastic. And this one actually goes out to 48 inches. They have one that's a little bit shorter in length that comes out about maybe, I think it's 24 inches. So that's big time saver, no drop cloth, nothing. Just put it down on baseboard and pull it out, and you have that area covered. Then the next thing you want to do, obviously you want to have the wall already painted the underneath color, the base color that you want. Since I'm painting it, making it look like a tile, I already have the base of it painted white because I want it to look like a cement tile. Now, this is my actual tile or stencil that I've actually bought it on Etsy, and I'll make sure that I link all these products down below. That way you guys can get quick access to them. But this is a beautiful tile. It's got that farmhouse look. It's great. It's really easy to work with. And basically how I set this up is I use painter's tape, obviously, to attach it to the wall so that it holds it in place. And when I do, I make sure that I use a level, and this one's seen better days, obviously. But I make sure I put a level above it just to make sure that it's completely level and straight when I place it on my wall. Now, one great thing that you can do in order to prevent bleeding over to the other side when you're actually rolling it on, which will happen, it's going to end up happening. It's not going to be perfect, just to let you know, is just take some spray adhesive. This stuff is old as heck, but it still works. So put some spray adhesive, and if it's really strong, you want to leave it a couple of minutes. That way it gets tacky, and can easily just put it on the wall and remove it. But I like to spray the back of it. That way whenever I center it and put it up with my painter's tape, it actually, everything sticks to it, not just where I put my painter's tape. And this actually prevents a lot of, bleed over and, getting in and messing up the actual design. Now, for applying my paint, I actually like to use a 4-inch foam roller just like this. And, just make sure you have the right little handle for it. And I think this is what gives the best and even coverage for your application on the wall. It does a really good job. It goes on smoothly. Now, what you want to do is with your paint, you can use any kind of paint. You can use acrylic paint if you want. You can use chalk paint. You can use regular latex for your walls. And I've done latex both times I've stenciled, and it works just fine. You want to pour it into your container, and I usually use something like this because it fits perfect for my 4-inch roller. And after you've removed the paint from it as much as you can, then you're going to want to use that, get a piece of paper, a plate. I can't even say it. Get a plate and then roll off as much paint as you can on this plastic, just disposable plate. Because you want to make sure that this is not saturated. The more saturated that this is, the more bleed over you're going to get in your stencil, and you don't want that. You almost want to be frustrated at how little paint there is on the roller in order for you to do a good job. So after you put it in here, take off as much as possible. I wouldn't even drench it. Just make sure you barely get it, and then just roll it to get an even application on your foam, and then on here, and remove the excess. And that is how you actually apply it on your foam roller. I'll show you exactly how I apply it on the wall in just a few minutes. Now, I usually have some paper towels on hand. I like to have, ones that are slightly damp so that I can, get any immediate mess ups and just wipe them off. But then I also like to have a couple of dry ones just laid down like this on any surface. And when I'm painting, you will notice that when you paint a stencil, there will be a paint accumulation along these edges. It's just going to happen. So, and then what's going to happen is when you pull off that stencil and you apply it in another section, whatever is behind here that accumulated on these edges, you're going to automatically get on that wall. And so what I like to do is I like to take the stencil after every application, and I like to put it on a piece of paper towel just like this, and I like to kind of go back and forth with it, because if there's any paint on the back that's immediately going to get on my wall, it's going to get caught in the paper towel. And I've learned that just, messing around and trying to figure out a solution to it, because it's inevitable. But doing just that, just taking it and rubbing it on paper towel, gets all that immediate paint that's going to go on your wall and you don't want. So then another thing that's going to happen is during your entire application, you're going to get buildup on the edges of this. So you're going to have to remove all of the paint that's on your stencil maybe 2 to 3 times before you're even done with the wall. So the best thing for this to remove paint, especially if you're using the latex paint, is this right here. And this is why I have this little bin in the back, because what I like to do is when I'm removing the paint from here between applications, or when I'm done with my stencil, I actually stick it in this little bin on the bottom, and I spray it down. And I spray all over it, just basically drench it. And then I close it, because this does have a pretty strong smell. And again, I'll link down to it below. But it smells quite a bit, and it's not pleasant. So I close it and I leave it there. 5 to 10 minutes if it's not a lot of paint, or up to half an hour sometimes, depending on how much I have accumulated on there. If I'm like toward the end of my paint job and I don't want to clean in between, yeah, there'll be quite a bit of paint. And it'll start drying on your stencil, and it's going to be hard to remove. So you're going to need something like this. So then after that, you just get a simple little brush like this, and I lift it up, and I start just really slightly just kind of going on top of the stencil. You don't want to do it too hard, because you don't want to bend any of the little, little details like this. You don't want to bend this, because then you basically screw up your stencil. So you're just going to rub on top of it, and you will see that the latex paint will just start peeling off. And then just run it underneath some water and your stencil will look like this again. This stencil, I've used it, and as you can see, there is no paint on there. So this stuff is the best thing you can have to remove latex paint from your stencils. And I've actually used it on other stuff. Like if I've had, if I've removed paint in a sink or something, and I had some that stuck to it, I would just spray this on there and it just comes right off. So this stuff is awesome. All right, so we got the kind of how to apply it, how to prep, and how to clean it. Now, I want to walk you guys through how I actually pick a spot on the wall to start on and how I start applying it. So let's get to it. This is the wall that I will be doing. And as you can see, it's a pitched kind of ceiling over the garage, and so it's not a square wall. So typically, oh, and you can see here I already have the bottom nice and covered with my painter's tape and plastic. Now usually when I paint, I don't cover the entire baseboard, but here I actually have. I've made sure I've covered it to the very top. When I paint my walls, I don't go all the way to the top simply because I paint my baseboards every time I paint a room, because there's no way in heck I'm going to paint walls and then not have my baseboards be nice and clean and crisp and brand new as well. So every time I paint a room, I paint them so I don't cover them up. But since they're already been painted, I don't want the stencil to actually, you know, any of the paint from the stencil to actually drip on them. So I make sure I cover every little last bit up to the ridge. So that's done. The cover plates are off, and we're ready to rock and roll. Now I got a couple of little areas on that window that I need to clean up after I'm done with the wall, but it's all good. So typically, in order to find the center, you always want to put your stencil in the center and then work your way out. But since I don't have that option right now, because this is kind of a weird room and there's a window right in the center, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the exact center over here. I'm going to find the exact center of the window and start my stencil above there. That way at least that is centered, and then all of them will work their way out and they will look better that way. So with that, we're going to get started. Okay, so as you can see, I already put the painter's tape on top of the stencil and I sprayed it with a spray adhesive. So you kind of want to see it's kind of tacky. That's how you want it. Okay, so as you can see, I went ahead and covered this up. That way my stencil doesn't, when I'm brushing it in here, it bends in and it doesn't get on the frame of the window. Now, what we did was, when my husband did this because he's actually tall, we measured the center of the ceiling line, and then we did a weighted string and we got the center down here, because I want to make sure that the first tile that I do is in the center of the room and directly above the window, so that when it goes out it looks even. So we went ahead and did that, and I made sure that it was nice and level. You can check by putting it right on top, sitting it right on top of the stencil, and you can see it's, or I don't know if you can see, but it is level right there. And I went ahead and just put it up here with tape, and I'm about to roll my first stencil. Alright, so I have my paint in my little pail, and I've already rolled some on this. And again, you want a small amount as possible on there, because you don't want to wet it too much, because then it will start bleeding through the stencil. Then you take your paper plate and just roll as much paint as you can get off. Go ahead, I'm going to go really softly and just go up and down and keep it same way. Now again, it's not going to be perfect. When you peel this off, you'll see there will be some imperfections. There's a couple of really small details right here, but it's okay. First of all, cement tile, which is the look that we're going for, isn't perfect. And honestly, stenciling is very Monet. If y'all remember the movie Clueless, it's really nice from afar, but when you get up close, you start seeing all those imperfections. And that's totally fine, because this is actually something that's hand done. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to minimize as much error as you can, and that's what we're doing here by taking all these steps. All right, so there is the first coat, and we're gonna go ahead and take it off. And that's what it will look like. So as I mentioned earlier, when, in between stenciling, and this does take a little bit of time, but I'm okay with it, especially when it starts caking onto the stencil. It will bleed through the back, and I just kind of come across here and just kind of rub it like this. And if there's any loose paint on the back of it, the paper towel actually picks it up and not on the wall. As you can see right here, there was a little bit of paint. And if I would have put that on the wall, that would have gotten on the wall. And that helps a little bit. So what's great about these stencils, again, as you can see, there's going to be a little bit of bleed through. That's totally fine. This is up about high anyways, so it's not really going to be noticeable from afar. What's great about these stencils is that they have these little guides, so you automatically know where your next one is going to be, so you stay square. As long as this first one is level and you follow it through, you should get a pretty consistent pattern. Now, just remember, whether or not you go up or down, you have to keep in mind, and you can do it while it's still a little damp. It's totally fine. What's going to happen is you have to move this tape up here because you don't want to tape on top of what you've already painted. So what you do is you just move it and you place it right on top and over. See, this little guide right here is telling me I need to go over that one and that one right there that I've already painted. You want to get it as close to it as possible. And when you do, it takes a little bit of time. It gets easier as you keep going. It's been a little while since I've used this stencil. Then, whoop. And then there you go. You just adhere it since it's still tacky, and you're ready to start your next stencil. When you have a stencil that's going to overlap like this over any kind of crown molding, any baseboards, any walls that are going to be, you know, any stops on any walls, you don't have to tape it down. You leave it loosely like this. Because what's going to happen is when you roll it down, you're going to see in just a second, it's going to automatically touch the wall and it'll be perfectly fine. So you don't want to tape it down on anything like this. And here we're going to do the second stencil. What I like to do is I actually like to go over this first initial one right here and then work my way out. There you have it. So as you can see right here, this is how far I've gotten with the stencil. This is as much as I've done so far, and the stencil already needs a cleaning. If you look really closely right here, you will see that it starts to accumulate on those ridges. And what happens is the more it accumulates there, first of all, the more bleeding you're going to get, and second of all, the smaller the actual stencil is going to get because it's going to start building on that ridge and building and building. So these small details that you see right here, they're going to start getting smaller, and it's going to affect what you do on the wall because then you're going to start seeing that everything on the wall just starts kind of getting thinner. So you want to stop at this point and you want to clean your stencil. Okay. So as you can see, I'm just going to go ahead and use that little pail or bucket, or I use a little storage container for it, and I'm just going to place it on the bottom. And I'm going to take my latex remover. You can find this online, and I'll put a link down to it below. But this is basically the best stuff out there to remove latex paint from anything. And what you want to do is you want to just turn it on. Yeah. And then you just want to just get it completely covered, like really, really drenched. And you will start seeing that it starts working right away. It'll start dripping down. See it right there. Now this stuff does smell, and the reason I use a storage container for it is because I need it to sit for a while the chemicals work to remove it. And since it's smelly, I pretty much just cover it up and wait a few minutes until I can go ahead and remove the paint. Okay, so just real quick, also we want to make sure that you do work in a well-ventilated area when you work with this. Again, it is pretty strong, and the reason I'm doing this indoors right now is because it is freezing cold outside and I'm just demonstrating this. And I do have a cover on it, like I mentioned before. But a good place to do this is like in the garage, or if you have to, you know, do it indoors for whatever reason, just make sure you wear a good mask. So some of you may know this, but some of you may not. More than likely you will not stencil an entire wall in one day. So what you want to do is you want to get some saran wrap, easy enough, and wrap this little puppy up. Make sure everything is nice and tight and there's no air in it. Stick it in your fridge, let it sit overnight, and tomorrow when you go to paint again, just unwrap it and it's ready to paint. So I'm actually really excited because our new home actually has a sink inside of the laundry room and has come very handy when it comes to cleaning off stuff like this. So if you have one of these, you're already doing good. So we faced it down onto the liquid that was removing it. It's actually better that way because then it really just gets all in there. And what you want to do is you want to take your brush really thinly, just like this, and you can see sometimes you don't even need to scrape. You may need to on the edges because it will build up, because that's kind of where you stop rolling. When you're rolling over the stencil, you're doing this, and you'll see that the edges will be a little thicker, so you will need to scrape those. But very gently you want to just pull the paint off, and as you can see, it just starts peeling off. Look how easy that is with that spray. And before you know it, you'll have a super clean stencil and you can start painting again. Now, when you get to these little details right here, I would do it as lightly as possible because you don't want to accidentally bend one of those, because then you bend it and then you're kind of screwed. But one thing I do want to point out is that this does not dissolve the paint. This merely peels it off of the stencil. So make sure that you do not let this go down your drain and you dispose of it properly in the trash, okay? Okay, so as you can see, I have my stencil and it is completely clean. All of the paint came off of it. What I did find that happened was, and I believe it's because of the paper towel brand that I happened to use this time, the fibers from the paper towel was actually sticking on to the spray adhesive whenever I was rubbing it on between applications on the wall, so that I would get any bleed over to automatically come off. So going forward, and I suggest you just start this way just to prevent this from happening, is to use wrapping paper or tissue paper, like for wrapping gifts and stuff, or I'm sorry, for putting in like gift bags, because that doesn't have any fibers that would come off like it would a paper towel. It's a lot smoother. You can also use like kind of like brown paper bags or something like that, something that doesn't have lots of little bits of fibers coming out. And again, I use Goo Gone to remove it, and as you can see, it's all off. It came off cleanly. But in order to prevent that headache, just use this stuff. Now for painting over a socket like this, you're not going to want to tape that down. As you can see, that's not taped down. Just leave it loosely. You're going to make sure everything is actually is secured properly on these three sides. But as you paint, you're going to paint and you're going to push this down over into that area like this, and it's just gonna push everything down so that you can manipulate the stencil. By letting the stencil corner without any adhesion on the wall, you're going to be able to work around all these areas to get as close to, as possible to this, and you don't have to worry about it being perfect in the edge, because the plate is eventually going to cover it up. But for something like this, just make sure that you leave it loose. Attach it everywhere else so that you can work the stencil in. And I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. So now, moment of truth. This is the that stencil as I'm taking it off. And as you can see, It worked just fine right there. And for situations where you have a window frame or a wall and you don't actually have enough space to fit the entire stencil in there, most stencil kits come with these small pieces like this for situations just like these. So you can go ahead and put them up on your wall and use a small little foam brush like this. Now, when you reach the end of the wall and you don't want to get any more stencil on the opposite wall, like this case, because I'm just doing an accent wall, make sure you cover it up. I'm using the lid of an old shoebox where I taped it up with painter's tape, as you can see, and I left the left side of the stencil loose. I'm not taping it up to the wall because when I roll on my paint, I want that to move into the groove and stretch as much as possible so that I can get to the very end of the corner. And the last thing you want to do if you're a perfectionist like me is get a small artist brush with either the white or the stencil paint and just touch up any areas you think, are just too noticeable and you just want to get rid of and make them smooth. And those are all my tips and tricks to get a perfect stenciled wall like the one that you see here that's in my craft room currently. I hope you like this video. I really hope that all of these tips and all these products will help you out when you decide to tackle this on your own. As always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this, tutorials, and more things that I do around my house, please make sure you hit subscribe and hit that little bell to get notified every time I upload a new YouTube video. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.